Cuisine. Asia. Asian cuisine has successfully spread throughout the world thanks to the huge movement of Asian people over the years. Indian and Chinese food are hugely popular in places like West Europe and North America, while Thai, Japanese and more recently Vietnamese food are readily available. Africa. African cuisine is less so. Seasonal fruit and vegetables, the local game known as bush meat, dairy, rice and cereals have all found their way into the local diet. The influence of colonialism has had a greater effect on African cuisine, although the French baguette is just one example of the influence the French had in Indochina. The flavors of the Mediterranean countries are the only form of African cuisine to reach beyond national borders in Africa to any extent. Religion. Asia. Several religions were born in Asia: Buddhism, Hinduism, Confucianism, Jainism, Islam, Judaism and even Christianity. Religion has also played a major role in Africa, with the main religion, Islam, brought from Asia. Just over half of Africa's people are Muslim, with the second most popular religion Christianity. Traditional religions are still followed in many parts of Africa, just as they are in Asia. Many of the top tourist attractions in Asia are based around religious sites. They include temples and pagodas throughout Indochina, some with Hindu origins and others strictly Muslim. Angkor in Cambodia, Bagan in Myanmar, the temples of Bangkok in Thailand and monks of Laos seeking alms each morning all attract significant tourist numbers. Africa. In contrast, there are few religious attractions of similar appeal in Africa. Lalibela in Ethiopia is one obvious exception. Some of the rock churches date back to the 7th century, with Ethiopia one of the early countries to embrace Christianity. They are a major pilgrimage destination. This is different but not big difference. Asia is the original religious beliefs and Africa is less. This is my idea on this. What do you think about it? Please drop it comment, and if you have something you wanted us to talk about it, write it comment. Don't forget to support us by subscribing and linking. Thank you all. Love and peace. While Africa may be the oldest inhabited continent on Earth, it still lags behind the others in terms of infrastructure. To compensate for that, it has a huge number of attractions that make it worth all the frustrations that tourists can feel from time to time as they travel around. Where else in the world are there vast plains where wild animals roam free? The stunning coastline, especially on the Indian Ocean side, has mile after mile of beautiful beach with the warm crystal waters very enticing. Inevitably, such a vast continent with several degrees of latitude either side of the equator has a huge variety. The northern coastline is the Mediterranean and Arabic, while the southern tip is where the Indian Ocean meets the Atlantic water coming straight up from the Antarctic. That water does not warm up significantly until it approaches the equator on Africa's west coast. In contrast, Asia, with the largest continental population of all and certainly an even longer coastline, can boast the most impressive mountain range in the world, the Himalayas, a huge variety of climates and cuisines that have spread all over the world. Asia has made more impact on the rest of the world than Africa, which is still a place where exploration proved extremely difficult, and even today, the influence of the world's most powerful nations in 21st century life are patchy. For some travelers, that is part of Africa's charm and one of the reasons why it is a destination well worth visiting. Geography. Asia. Asia is the largest continent in the world with a massive 44.58 million kilometers square landmass and has a total of 48 countries according to the United Nations. Africa. Africa, on the other hand, is the second largest continent at 30.37 million kilometers square and comprises 54 countries. Those countries include a number of different tribes, at times even within a single nation, and a vast array of languages and dialects within a single country. Some of today's national boundaries were made for colonial convenience rather than the reality of the traditional tribal areas. That strategy alone has created untold problems over the years. Typical weather. Asia. The weather in Asia is as diverse as the size of its landmass. While it is difficult to generalize and weather systems seem less predictable than in years gone by, monsoons are the single biggest climatic factor in much of Asia. Some countries actually experience differing monsoons in different parts of the country. Countries like the Philippines, Thailand, East Timor, Indonesia, Singapore and parts of India have a tropical climate with dry and wet seasons. In contrast, others have 4 distinct seasons with huge variations when altitude becomes a factor, such as Korea and Japan. It is worth remembering that most of Asia lies in the northern hemisphere, unlike Africa, which straddles the equator. Africa. The Mediterranean in the north and South Africa in the south have what is commonly described as a Mediterranean climate, never very cold but neither extremely hot. The sea influence moderates temperatures around the year. In between, there is the vast Sahara Desert, the Sahel, which is susceptible to drought, in the equatorial region with significant annual rainfall and dense forest in many countries. Further south is the region where the wildlife attracts huge tourist numbers each year. There is certainly a rainy season here, and migrating herds follow the rains in search of good grazing every year. It is never cold by day here at any time of the year, but it can be extremely hot either side of midday. The result is many of the animals seek shade, with the prey species safe from lions etc., who sleep by day and hunt by night. So, what is your idea on this? Just write it in comment. For me, Africa and Asia looks the same on one hand, in other hand Asia is different on climate. Asia is cold most and Africa is hot, but they both experience all climates. Asians are the brothers. Please, if you like the video, make sure hit the red button down. Love and peace. Languages spoken. Asia. There are a multitude of different languages spoken in Asia, and the majority do not speak English at all except in countries like the Philippines and Singapore. Languages spoken in Asia include Mandarin, Cantonese, Hindi, English, Bahasa, Nepalese, Thai, Vietnamese, and Khmer. Africa. In contrast, Africa is home to thousands of native languages and dialects, even within a single community. While countries like Rwanda, Burundi, Ethiopia, Botswana, Zimbabwe and South Africa speak their respective native languages as their official language, many other countries speak foreign languages like English, Spanish, Arabic, French and Portuguese due to the influence of colonization. English-speaking African countries, also known as Anglophile nations, include Ghana, Nigeria, the Gambia, Liberia in West Africa and Zambia, South Sudan, Namibia, Uganda and Malawi over in the east. Travelers can make themselves understood far easier in Africa than Asia because even locals from different tribes find a common tongue in the former colonial language. Cultures. Africa is arguably the most culturally and linguistically diverse continent in the world, with most of its countries having at least 10 to 15 languages and ethnic tribes. Asia also has thousands of different languages, groups and cultures, with India alone having more culture and languages than the entire Europe. The influence of the 21st century is clearly more evident in Asian life than African life. Despite African countries almost all having colonial rulers at one time, some of the tribes of Africa live as their ancestors did centuries ago. Little has changed from their traditional clothing to their general lifestyles and subsistence living. Although small ethnic tribes still exist in pockets in Asia, that is far less common than in Africa. Traditional dress in Asia is often only seen during festivals and visits to the temple. Despite their differences, both continents share a few similarities, including both have a culture of ancestor worship and have respect for elders. They share a colonial heritage and duality of language, i.e. local and colonial. Both share a belief in superstitions, e.g. ghosts, black magic, etc. Rice is central to the cuisine of both continents, unlike in Europe and North America. What do you think about this? Asia and Africa looks the same, but there is a difference between their languages. One speaks the original only. To be clear, Asia does. For Africa, the languages spoken is totally changed because of colonization. But they are also speaking native language too. Asia and Africa closely look the same. Remember to subscribe if you like the work and comment. Love and peace. Africa as a tourist destination. There is huge potential for tourism in Africa, which remains well behind Asia in popularity. Many Asian countries attract large numbers of tourists every year, and there is significant growth in others. This has meant that the tourist infrastructure is either in place or being developed quickly. That is not the case in Africa. Safaris are very popular, so parts of East and Southern Africa have good accommodation in place, but when it comes to general tourism, only a small number of countries can cater for increased tourism at this stage. South Africa has an infrastructure to match countries anywhere, but elsewhere, there are only pockets of good accommodation and travel infrastructure. Tourists will find reasonable accommodation along the Mediterranean. Elsewhere in Africa, accommodation of tourist level is currently found in capital cities. Well-established tourist resorts exist on the east coast, especially in Kenya and to a lesser extent Tanzania. Africa is starting to develop as a tourist destination. The catalyst for that has been safaris, but there are countries which have a great deal to offer as well. Egypt has a rich history, while there was an ancient civilization in Zimbabwe with the Victoria Falls a stunning sight. Cross over into Zambia and visitors will find a stable country where conflict has not existed since independence. Ghana in the west may appear poor, but it has been an established territory since the 11th century. The Ashanti are a welcoming people and democracy is firmly established. Top destinations. The two continents both have similarities amongst their top destinations, differences as well. Take for example Boracay off the tip of Panay Island in the Philippines. Travelers will see the similarity between Boracay and the island of Zanzibar in the Indian Ocean off Tanzania. The whole of the Indian Ocean coastline on Africa's eastern side has lovely beaches down through Kenya and Tanzania to Mozambique and South Africa. In few cases they are very busy and the waters are most tempting. Tourists can head for Nepal simply to see Mount Everest without thoughts of climbing it. Africa's largest mountain, Kilimanjaro, is far less imposing, but it can be scaled without mountaineering experience. The UNESCO World Heritage Site of Angkor in Cambodia is known the world over by everyone with an interest in religion and culture. Angkor Wat was a Hindu temple built during the Khmer Empire. In Ethiopia in northeast Africa, there is Lalibela, another with UNESCO recognition. This region was one of the first to embrace Christianity in the 4th century, and the site received significant numbers of pilgrims wishing to see the rock churches built between the 7th and 13th centuries. Africa has no equivalent to the Great Wall of China, and the Trans-Siberian Railway has no equivalent in Africa. Asia. Huge modern cities are distinctly 21st century, with Africa having few to compare. However, although Asia has parks where wildlife, especially the tiger, finds protection, it cannot compete with the variety and locations where travelers can enjoy a safari. Africa's advantage over Asia is there has been so little relative development within the open natural environment. What I think on this must be discussed after. Your ideas on this. What else do you know about? Please share with us in comment, and don't forget to subscribing and linking.